What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse. I am super excited to be in conversation with my next guest. You know, I have been talking very frequently here on the Mike Muse Show about housing, real estate, access to generational wealth through housing. I talk often about housing appraisals and what we've been seeing within our country with so many discrepancies across the country within housing. But I have the perfect guest today who is going to have a really great conversation with us about what they are doing at the Housing Urban Development Organization and why, because I have the Secretary Marcia Fudge. Good morning, Secretary Fudge. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me this morning. How are you?
I cannot complain. Secretary Fudge, I just want to say this is such a full circle moment for me as we discuss this issue because my mother was a manager within the Lansing Housing Commission. And so really focusing on HUD and really assisting the residents of Lansing, Michigan. And so I grew up in this space, right? And so this is kind of like my first introduction was into housing and equity and fair housing through the work of my mother. I used to go to her office all the time, and she used to take very frequent trips to DC to meet with your organization at the time. She's retired now, but at the time.
Well, please thank her for her service because it really is service. It's really not work. It's really serving other people. So thank her for me.
Yeah, I love how you're doing that. But let's just get to it. You are here today because the HUD is announcing the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule, which is an amendment to the Fair Housing Act. Talk to us a little bit about what this rule change is in terms of how you guys are preparing equity when it comes to housing.
Well, one of the things that I'm most excited and proud about is the fact that we are, for the first time as a federal government, actually saying to the world, yes, we understand that there is still discrimination in housing. Yes, we admit that we have been a part of it. Yes, we admit that segregation still exists, that we are concentrating poverty in communities in a way that should have stopped years and years ago. And so what the rule is going to do is basically allow us to provide more transparency to the public, a greater opportunity for public input into what should happen in their communities. It gives us more enforcement rules to make sure that communities, once they say, this is our plan, we can say, if you don't follow this plan, we're going to take action because we can no longer continue to go through and not allow the kinds of access to communities that we should have to make sure that communities are treated fairly. So that's really what the rule is about. It is about saying that fair housing is the law of the land. 55 years after the Fair Housing Act, we are still dealing with the same issues that necessitated the Fair Housing Act in the first place. And so the act itself requires for us to be proactive in trying to eradicate discrimination and segregation from our housing. So that's what we're doing today. We're putting out a rule. We're asking for people to give their input on the rule so that we can be sure that once and for all, we can address fair housing in a way that is actually fair, that actually includes the thoughts of other people. So that's what we're doing today.
Well, I just wanted to say that I love the acknowledgement of the wrongness that the federal government has done and played its part in discriminatory practices through policies and association with it. I think a lot of times that's just half the battle. A lot of times communities just want to hear the word and for individuals to take accountability for the actions that have been done. So let's just make this really plain, right? When you talk about when communities, who is this for? Right? Like who is this targeting? Like as my audience is listening, who is this addressing?
Well, it's addressing certainly low income, moderate income people. It's addressing people that live in public housing because public housing agencies are required to go to their residents and ask them about the rule. You see, in the past, what we've always done is we plan these meetings and we want everybody to come to us. This rule requires that you go to them. This rule requires that you do a certain amount of outreach and that you know your audience so that you don't plan a meeting at 9 a.m. when you know your people can't come to a meeting until after work. So we are very, very intentional about how we are addressing this. And that is why we are requiring public housing authorities. That is why we are requiring cities to come back to us with the kind of information that they have gleaned and gained from their own people.
Really holding people accountable, right? And creating
Absolutely.
a two-way dialogue, because I've always felt that this has always been a one-way conversation. And something that I saw that's going to, in this rule, that's going to address is a couple of things I want to pull out and talk with you, because I think it has long-term impact. One is segregation and integration. I think that is very important. And I'm curious, like, what does that mean for you? Because when I think about segregation and integration, I think about making sure that individuals have equity not only in the placement of demographics, but then that leads to placement of school districts, right? To make sure that their children have the best resources as possible as other individuals who live in that city. So can we just dive into a little bit about what you guys are discussing when you say segregation and integration?
Well, one of the things that we have always done is we have isolated poverty. So as a nation, we continue to put poor people in certain communities. We never ever give low income, moderate income, poor people the opportunity to live in communities which they choose. We limit it by many, many things. Source of income discrimination, not in my backyard, the ability to build moderate and low income housing in communities, many reasons. But what we are saying now is people should have that opportunity. They should not be forced to only live in certain areas, as you say, that are that put them in a position where they can't have the best schools, where
Yeah.
they don't have the best services. And so we are looking at not only upgrading the services that exist, but allowing people the mobility. So when we work with other agencies in the federal government, we are saying to them, all of us together need to try to solve this problem.
Mhm.
Because we have always worked in these silos, Mike, that don't allow us to move forward in a positive way. And the other thing I think that's going to be especially good about this rule is that everything that we get from these communities in their plan is going to go on our website. The transparency is going to, I think, raise the entire level of conversation about what we do and how we do it, because nothing is going to be hidden anymore. Everything they send us is going to be on our website.
I think that's so good about the transparency, because sometimes some individuals just don't know exactly what HUD does, right? And especially if you don't have the experience to have been a part of HUD. That's one thing. Also, too, for individuals who may have family members or who are advocates, can now have a better understanding to help be an advocate for their family member when it comes to that. I know I don't have you for much time, Secretary Fudge, but if you could just indulge me with a conversation around home appraisals. That's been a really big part of my Constitution. It's been a really big part of the show, right? And so I think this is a great bookend as we talk about individuals who are in public housing and assistance who are under-resourced. But at the same time, as you and I both know, discriminatory practices happening throughout the entire ecosystem of housing, particular Black families who are of means, who have an income, who are able to, maybe first-time homeowners are looking to sell to create a generational wealth. What is your agency doing for individuals who see discriminatory practices within home appraisals?
Listen, we are already putting in place a system by which we have a direct hotline to us. We're showing and educating consumers through our housing counseling how they can request another appraisal, how they can say that we know this valuation is not correct and challenge it. We've created this task force that we call PAVE, which is to talk about how communities of color continue to be redlined. And that is what it is, continue to be redlined by undervaluing our homes. And it is by design, quite frankly, that the Blacker and browner your community is, the lower the value of your home. It is proven. It is not something that's anecdotal. It is a fact. So what we are doing is, number one, we're taking on the appraisal industry. When you have an industry that is 90+% white males, then you have a problem. And so we are taking on the industry. We are talking about how we hold accountable the foundation. We're looking at their training. We're looking at all of the systems that go into it, because it is a major problem. You talked about wealth. We lose over $1 billion annually, just as Black people, in the devaluation of our homes annually, $1 billion. So if we could just fix that problem, we could change the wealth gap almost overnight.
Immediately, how would someone go about questioning or contesting their appraisals. I know this particular one has to deal with individuals who have federally backed mortgages. And so I'm just curious, like, how would they contest their appraisal?
Just go to HUD and go to our PAVE website. I think it's pave.gov. What is it? Pave.gov. I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay.
And they can come directly to us, or they can complain, file a fair housing complaint.
Perfect. Secretary Fudge, this is why it's important to have individuals like yourselves, individual administration, come on to the Mike Muse Show and other shows sometimes to make it plain, right? And just to give really practical steps, because we talk about these things all the time and there are solutions, there are ways to go about it, but a lot of times we just don't know how to do. And just in a short amount of time that you've been on, I found the information you've given so resourceful. What about, lastly, as I let you go, individuals who don't have a federally backed mortgage, are they able to contest their appraisals within the HUD system?
They are. This is what you tell them to go. It's actually pave.hud.gov, pave.hud.gov. And they are always have the opportunity to file a fair housing complaint. That's what we do. We have an Office of Fair Housing that really specializes in nothing more than making sure that people are treated fairly in this country. So file a complaint. There are many ways to get to us, but I would say either go to pave.hud.gov or call our Fair Housing Office.
Secretary Fudge, I don't want to keep you. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing all that is to come and the impact of the affirmatively furthering fair housing notice. That is a tongue twister to say 10 times fast.
It really is. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it very, very much.
Secretary Fudge, have a wonderful day.